All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome to the first CMWS Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series webinar of the year. Very excited to have you here with us for the first part of our Grassroots Mentoring series, Grassroots Mentoring Program Development from the Ground Up. Already seeing so many people joining in, which is amazing. As you're joining in, feel free to drop in your name, where you're calling in from in the chat. We were just sharing some, exchanging stories about how cold it is in the various parts of the country that we're all in. Hopefully you're staying warm, staying cozy. But yeah, I'm going to give folks just another minute or two to join in. Feel free to, again, if you're just joining, drop your name and where you're calling in from in the chat. And maybe we can have a competition. How cold is it where you are? Whoever has the lowest temperature, maybe you win. I don't know if that's losing, depending on if you like the cold or not. But either way, happy you're here. For folks who are just joining in, we are here for part one of the Grassroots Mentoring CMWS webinar series, program development from the ground up. We'll get started in just another minute or so that folks can join in. I'm seeing awesome. Oh, everybody's dropping in. I see Carrie freezing in Lansing, Michigan. Oh, we have someone from England. Awesome. Iowa, Ohio, Texas, Indiana, Seattle, already seeing all corners of the country and even international folks. So that's amazing. Maryland, DC. I'm here in Baltimore, so I always have a soft spot for my fellow Marylanders or DCers, DMVers, however you want to say it. Awesome. Texas, North Carolina, more UK folks. Awesome. So for folks who are just joining in with us today, welcome to part one of the Grassroots Mentoring series, program development from the ground up. We're just giving folks a second to settle in and sharing your name and location in the chat. North Carolina, Iowa, Massachusetts, Michigan, 19 degrees. Wow. What is it here? Baltimore's 33 degrees, so I can't complain as much. Ohio, Rhode Island. Awesome. All right. So I think we'll get started. So welcome in again, everybody. Thanks for dropping your name and location in the chat. Great to see you all here, or to have you all here with us today. Hopefully we can talk a little bit some more and engage more throughout the entire webinar. But just again, today is the first part of the three-part mini-series on grassroots mentoring titled Program Development from the Ground Up. So I will move on to the next slide. To begin, we have some tips for engagement. So you're all already using the chat, which is amazing. And yeah, I see a question. This is being recorded. So we'll send that out along with any slides and resources next week. But for now, on the right side of the screen here, you'll see how you can engage with us today. Using the chat box, feel free again to continue to introduce yourself, talk with one another, share any resources that you have, respond to the things that presenters are saying. We definitely want to hear from you all and really try to make this as much of a conversation as possible, and know that there's so many incredible insights in the chat as well. So uplift those ideas, and we'll be sure to include those as we go. The other area that you can engage is by using the Q&A feature also in that toolbar. There you can ask presenters questions, upvote questions that you'd like to see answered, and we have a couple different points throughout the webinar where we'll address those. On the left side of the page, this is brand new to the CMWS, so I'm very excited to kick this off. For this series, we'll actually have a community of practice to accompany each webinar. And so this is going to be led by Bianca Murick of Mentor Virginia. And really the purpose, this is an optional community of practice. You don't have to join in to make the most out of your experience of these webinars, but you're absolutely more than welcome to. And the purpose is really to build relationships with one another, connect with folks, and share experiences on either how you've implemented the learnings from these webinars, any challenges that are coming up, and again, just to connect with other folks that might be at similar kind of spots in their mentoring journey as you are. I'll send a link in the chat just in a second where you can sign up for that community of practice. Dates are still TBA, but you can expect them to come about 1 month after each webinar. So that'll be in February, June, and in October. They're about an hour and a half each, no prep really, and it's really just showing up and sharing your experiences and engaging in the discussion there. These slides, again, will be sent out. So if you don't click that link now, the link will also be in the slides. Just a little bit again about the series in general, because I know that this is a new structure for the CMWS. As if you had attended one previously, in previous years, you know that each month we had a distinct different topic throughout the year. So 12 different webinars throughout the year. But we've switched it up based on your feedback, based on a general desire to expand and enrich learning on fewer topics by dedicating more time to each topic. So this year, the CMWS will unfold as 4 distinct 3-part mini-series. And so the Grassroots Mentoring series is just one of those. All of the information and further explanation and description of each series is available on our website, which will also kind of help explore and navigate a little bit later today. For the Grassroots Mentoring CMWS series, essentially what we'll be doing with this one is we'll explore several aspects of what it means to start and sustain a mentoring program, again, with particular attention to grassroots mentoring organizations, and really highlighting a lot of the unique strengths that this type of grassroots and more local level organizations also have. Again, the webinars will be spread throughout the year. January 18th is today. The next one will be on May 16th, and the final one will be on September 19th. Since you all registered for today's, that means that you're automatically registered for all 3, so you do not need to register again, but you're more than welcome to add these to your calendar if they haven't I think they should have automatically been added, but we'll still be sending out reminders ahead of each one. And now I think this is the end of me talking as I introduce one of our amazing presenters, Florence Parks, who is the Executive Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters of the North Coast, has been a past coordinator for the Solano County Mentoring Collaborative, is on the leadership team for the California Mentoring Partnership, is a mentoring consultant, or I should say has been a mentoring consultant and TA provider for over 20 years, has assisted in developing 24 youth mentoring programs in the Bay Area, and has particular expertise with working with vulnerable populations and innovative efforts of providing match support and supervision, program design, and program sustainability. So I'll pass it over to you, Florence.
Thanks, Jake. And we know there are a lot of practitioners here. I kind of consider myself a practitioner. I practiced until for the last quarter of a century. And hopefully I'm getting some things right, but I've definitely made a lot of mistakes and had a lot of growth opportunities. So when you're thinking about grassroots programs, it's about creating those community of practices and learning and growing with other people around you. So I am honored to be working with Jerry Shirk today. He, just a few things about him here is that he definitely was the mentoring program consultant for since 1995. He's chaired the coalition of in San Diego, and he continues to design and support mentoring programs. But for this San Diego City Schools, he designed a program and ran a lot of group mentoring programs that helped inform his practices and his individual consulting practices. Currently, he's the Director of Education and Training for the California Mentoring Partnership. And so a colleague of mine, and over a quarter of a century ago, or close to, around 2000, I was developing a group mentoring program, and Jerry was the first class that I got to sit in. So a little bit of joy comes to me every time I get to learn again and participate in a learning environment with Jerry. So thank you for being here, Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Florence. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited about the webinar we put together. And go ahead and move to the next slide, please, Jake. So in talking with we have a work group for the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series. And one thing that we were realizing as we were discussing topics is there really was no kind of a basic, mentoring 101 grassroots type of webinar. And as Florence mentioned, I've been helping programs since 1995. And most of the programs that I help are grassroots. And, somebody comes up with an idea. How do we start a mentoring program? How do I take it from just being an idea and my idea to getting input from the community? So I'm really excited about this webinar, and we're going to focus on so many things. And just kind of a heads up, it takes a while to put all these pieces together. In working directly with programs over the years, um, I've asked program coordinators, how long did it take you to put the pieces together to figure out how to run or to design and run a mentoring program? And many people say around the 6 month mark of actually working within the program, they can see how like all these pieces kind of fall in place like a puzzle and fit together. So today you can see the topics. We'll start out with a logic model. Some people see the word logic model and their brain kind of explodes because it does get into kind of a research perspective. But I think Florence is going to explain it on a basic level, and I'll be one listening too because I'm not great with logic models myself. And then we'll talk about program management, including 501(c)(3), the various types of funding sources, along with the strategy of starting small. Probably our number one strategy if you're a new program is to start small. And then I'm really excited to talk about the design tools, the different tools that you can actually get into, and talking with others, collaborators, kind of figure out your program, what it is, what it looks like, how to describe it. And then we'll talk a little bit about learning program management and resources, mainly the wonderful resources that Mentor puts out, including the 3 tools that I'll be talking about regarding program development. So before I turn it over to Florence, who will take about the first 20 or 30 minutes, we wanted to bring up a couple polls to help us see who is here today. So Jake, if you would bring up the polls. So the mentoring model, what type of mentoring model do you have or plan to work with? And then choose whatever applies. Um, and I guess you can do multiple choice. So one-to-one mentoring, group mentoring, a combination of the two, team mentoring, other, or undecided. So go ahead and make your choice. And we'll give it a few seconds, and then I think Jake will bring up the results. And the results are just about over a third one-to-one mentoring, a fifth or 20% group mentoring, a combination, 52% team mentoring, 11 other, 3% undecided, 4%. So in my experience, this is just about what's out there. Maybe it's maybe a little heavier in one-to-one mentoring. But over the past few years, group mentoring has really come along, and then many programs are doing a hybrid. Okay, so thank you. Now we know a little bit more about what you're focused on, and we have one more question. How many years of experience do you have in the mentoring field? So just choose one, 0 to 1 years, 2 to 4, 5 to 10, 11 or more. We'll give you a few seconds. We have the Jeopardy music playing in our minds. And the results are, so 28% 0 to 1, 31% 2 to 4, 22% 5 to 10. So wow, it's spread evenly over those designated time periods. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Florence in a second. Just want to mention again that she'll go for 20 or 30 minutes, and at the end of the 20 30, or 30 minutes, we'll pause for some questions, and then I'll do the last 20 or 30 minutes. We'll pause for more questions. And so take it away, Florence Parks.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for sharing a little bit about why you're here. I think it's important for us to think about um, the the programs as we arrive. So 4% of us are just kind of here to figure out what kind of program might I start? And there's so many variations and so many opportunities to learn today. So lots of growth moments, and I'm looking forward to learning with you all in this community. So as one of the things we did in my experience developing lots of programs, even though this is only one example, Jerry and I we're kind of thinking about like, what does it take? What kind of investment does a person need to make? The sole proprietor, the person, maybe the thought leader, or the person that sees an issue and wants mentoring to solve that that situation. What kind of a investment would they need to make? And so we tapped the shoulders of one of our favorite programs, which is Aging Up. As a co-founder, early days, this is a program that I know is doing great work in the Sacramento region of California. And thankfully, they were able to get back to us. April Johnson and Keisha Sakazaki, who are running this wonderful program, invested, all three of us invested, I didn't even realize this, 50 hours of just brainstorming with meetings for 150 hours. And so as you're looking at these different pieces, like bringing on TA support, focus groups, we'll go over some of this today for sure. But what I want you to pay attention to is the 650 hours that were invested by all three of us at the onset of this program to create a 501c3 program. And with that in mind, you if you broke that down, it represents 12 to 15 hours a week for at least 1 year. And Aging Up took 2 years to develop. So that was about 6 hours a week that we all invested to make that program foundationally sound. Next slide, please. So Jerry did promise that we talk a little bit about how the puzzle comes together. And one of the initial things that you might do as you're discussing, deciding, and identifying the issue in your community, the grassroots, sometimes it starts with a problem, right? But sometimes it actually it starts with the opportunity that you see in why you want to develop your mentoring program. Other times, like 50% of us here, we're doing one-on-one plus. We are evolving our programs as they come up. So one of the things we use as tools is a logic model. And we can really demystify the logic model because the logic model truly is just a roadmap. It's a visual that takes all the information that you'll use for strategic planning and puts it in one tool that you can use to share with funders, you can use to share with stakeholders, staff, and because as you bring new volunteers and staff in, they need to know why your program exists too. So this tool, the logic model, is a very cathartic process that you want to take at the initial onset of deciding how you're going to address the problem or the situation. What is your mission? What is your vision? So you'll want to identify that problem, determine what inputs, what do you need to solve that problem or that opportunity, and then what are those outputs? What are the activities and things that you're going to do? So the difference between input and output can kind of get muddly, but the input is really like the staff, the resources, and then the output are the things that those staff are doing to come out with the outcome. And the outcomes, really, you want to start with the end in mind. So thinking about your long-term goals and going back from there. So that's why I shared this template, and you can have access to this template. But there's tons of logic models templates, and Jerry will share where we can get a lot of resources and tools. But this one I shared because it has short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. And so being able to use a logic model to kind of be the framework for your strategic planning as you're leaning in to identify why your program exists in the first place. And to put a little bit more, the next step after a logic model would be a theory of change. And that happens much later as you're practicing the logic model, seeing what other activities you need to get those outcomes. And so I believe more on theory of change will happen, and more information on theory of change is going to happen in future webinars. Next slide, please. So if you decide how your program model, if you could get to the privilege of deciding from the grassroots, from the ground up, how your program is going to be developed, there are many ways that you can situate that program. And sometimes the most sought after way is oftentimes developing your own 501c3, and that is because you get clarity of vision, your mission sometimes, but sometimes your pastor chaps you on the shoulder and says, we have these youth that are that need someone, and let's do a mentoring program. I heard about mentoring programs. Can you develop that? So, or maybe you're at a school site and they used to have a mentoring program, and you are the new person on the team and they've tasked you with that opportunity. So no matter how you come to developing this mentoring program, there are lots of ways you can situate yourself. And one is becoming that 501c3, which is a very formal process. But when you're a 501c3, you are responsible to the community. And also, as that sole proprietor, if you're one person or one individual that's starting it up, you also have to develop a board and be responsible to that board or that advocacy group. And so that 501c3 does, as we shared earlier, it comes with a lot of responsibility and time and investments. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. You can use a legal team to help you. You can research it and do it yourself, or you can even, there's lots of little programs on, and I won't name and shout any out because there's not a favorite of mine, but there are some programs online that will allow you to just fill in the blanks to create your 501c3. Either way, you're on that long-term journey with that 650 hours. So making sure that you can see that through and knowing the investment that you'll need to make. But if you also exist, a program can easily exist under a partnership, or have a fiscal agent or fiscal sponsor that can help accept the funds for you and help your program along. So there's many ways that you can set up your mentoring program. Even some are for profit. We're seeing more and more programs for profit as people are looking for ways to engage their youth. And a lot of them are taking, are focused on taking a young person from technology to in-person activities. And so we're seeing those mentoring programs where there's paid mentors. So there are not for-profit mentoring opportunities as well. Next slide, Jake. Thanks. We've seen it happen, but it's very rare to get funding for an idea, or what we like to call seed funding. It's kind of like asking for money from someone, but to build a house, but you've never built a house before. So a lot of funders don't find that as a safe bet. So you won't see a lot of funding that way, but it can happen that you spark someone's interest, the right conversation at the right time, and you get funded. But a great strategy for new programs is to start very small. So to create the history, the impact, and the foundation for your nonprofit or your mentoring programs, so that it shows that your logic, your theories are true, that when you do XYZ, then the output is what you're envisioning. History also includes this, or sometimes calls this, process data. So as you're going through the process, you're figuring out and you're pivoting and you're changing. And so a smaller start can really allow you to think through parts of your program, or practice and try things that you thought that might work and pivot. So, and it really helps with innovation and during that innovation stage. And when we think about starting small, that could be up to 5 matches in a mentoring program, because it's important, again, to build up that history, to include ways that you run your program, your organization, your operating systems, and most importantly, safety in your program. Because we really want to say in all mentoring that first, we did no harm, right? So when we stand up to support youth where they are, we want to make sure our programs are offering the support that we promise them. And another I know Jerry's going to go over the elements of effective practice, which give us so many great tools as we're developing this history, with even enhancements that you can make to your program. But throughout the Nonprofit Insurance Alliance, if you are developing a nonprofit, you'll definitely want to have insurance. But the assurance you get with NIA, or in California, we have NIAC, so the Nonprofit Insurance Alliance of California. They have a lot of helpful tools that, in addition, and templates that you can use especially with regards to safety, and protocols, policies, and procedures. All of those pieces. There's a template for it all, so you never have to reinvent the wheel, because the tools are out there. Next slide, please. And other funding, is it the chicken or the egg? I like to ask myself, because is it the funding that helps you develop a program and put it out there? Or is it the program that attracts the funding? And so people will have different experience in that. But the truth is that new programs, when they're looking, need sustainability. They need opportunities to have an healthy programs. And with a healthy program, it's making sure that you have consistent staff and team members that will follow through. Some ways that you can get some of those resources is through community-based organizations and foundations. Community foundations are a great asset for anyone that's thinking about their developing a nonprofit or a program. Sometimes they actually do have that seed funding. And they're a clearinghouse. So it's a one-stop shop. You can get information about how to fundraise. You can get information about program design. They often will have books that you can borrow instead of just purchase. So a great place to start is your community foundation in your local region. I love the Humboldt Area Foundation here and McLean Foundation. Both are great partners for Big Brothers Big Sisters and move our work along, and have maintained that partnership throughout the 55 years that our agency has been in this region. So I can't say enough about our community foundations and why they exist, because it is to support nonprofit and develop these environmental changes in our communities. And in addition to that, there's service clubs or chambers. So service clubs are great, especially those that align with your mission and vision. They can come alongside you. They do fundraising. They're like an extra arm of fund development, and great groups of people that are civically minded and civically engaged, and can also be a great source for recruitment. And although we won't get to go into recruitment in any depth because that's a whole 90 minutes on its own, we service clubs are another place that you should definitely tap for talent. And seeking out funds from individual donors, businesses, and corporations is another way. And don't underestimate the importance of in-kind relationship and in-kind donations. You can do that with media. Your local radio stations, or to get out the word, help with recruitment, help with additional donations, and lead things along. So in-kind donations can also be things as small as a local coffee shop that donates the, a free beverage for every beverage that your mentors buy. Your mentee could have one too. So don't underestimate in-kind relationships and in-kind donations. They're very helpful. And lastly, we want to say how important it is to have someone that understands the tone of today for grant writing, because there's a language that comes with grant writing. So if you're not spending most of your time, you need to delegate that responsibility as a nonprofit leader, and you need, or a mentoring manager, so that you can have that sustainability. Next slide, please. When you're thinking, we did some research in California at the California Mentoring Partnership some time ago. And what we found was that in the state of California, it costs between $22,500 and $10,000 for one mentoring relationship. But when we look at the nation after inflation, it used to be somewhere around $1,500. We're about $2,000 per match. The cost, the investment that you need to make in order to have a sound program, in order to follow the elements of effective practice, in order to invest in each of these matches for safety, you need to invest about $2,000 per match. So if you're thinking about how you're going to support your program, you want to think about that investment and how much you'll need to raise based on those numbers. So if you started off with 5 to 10 matches, that's doable. That fundraising for about $20,000, you can make that possible. And of course, there are programs that can get that number much further down south, because there's other resources in their community-based organizations. So although we say 2,000, when you're starting a new program, you kind of want to think that you're going to need to raise about $2,000 per match to support them throughout the year. And so that's why, and we want to make sure that we're responsible in supporting those matches. So you want to kind of think about the ratio of support staff to the number of matches that you're going to support. So for a very long time, we were hovering around that number of 35 for programs that are experienced, up to the number of 75 if you have the right resources and tech and team members that do other aspects of scheduling, assistance, all of those things. Then you might be able to support up to 75. But you want to think about this like a classroom. If you're a teacher, when you have a class of 50, do you get to really know them? And then you have to think with the match, there's actually at least three contacts that come along with a one-to-one match, right? You've got the mentor that you need to be in consistent communication with, and have appreciation and all the things that EEP will share with you. But also, then you have parent, and we have parent engagement. It's a whole new field now where we're not just taking a young person without supporting the family and being there. So you want that then the program should be thinking the second contact is a young person, and then the third would be the youth as well. So we have family, youth, and our mentors. So that's a 3-to-1. So you're really looking at with 20 matches, 60 contacts that you should be making monthly, at least in that first year, if not more frequently. And if we're doing group, there's a lot of people doing the 1-to-1 plus model, which means that, and someone had a question about our team model, our question about team mentoring. Team mentoring means you might have more than one mentor that is supporting a group of young people. So it's a team of folks. It could also be more than one mentor that's supporting one young person. And that's where it gets into those ranges of and more expensive programs, but it's worth every investment. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about starting small, and that's because it's the very best advice that we can give you. So we kind of want to hit you over the head with it. If you're just thinking about starting a grassroots program to solve an opportunity that has presented itself and to invest in the lives of the youth and help them to invest back in your life, then you want to start small. You want to make sure that you are thinking about how your program can impact that young person, the life, and also how your program existing, how important it is. Because one of the worst things that can happen is what we call the vacuum effect. And that's when you start something because you're really motivated and you're excited about it. And then you're faced with the fact that you might never have another day of service off. Like MLK Day is not a day off for you, it's a day on. Most holidays are going to be a day on for you because that's a great opportunity for you to outreach and meet and mingle and find more and recruit more mentors for you. So if you don't think about all of those many things and how your program's going to be impacted through those first few learning years, then that vacuum effect can happen. So we really want to be diligent and develop programs with the end in mind and be focused. And starting small might drive up the cost per match for a little bit while you're building that blueprint. But a house that has a design team is essential. Next slide, please. So we want to, as you're selecting this design team, we've mentioned that a couple of times. So this is a term that Jerry kind of coined for what I might call even an advocacy group or your board. But at the very early beginnings, this design team are the people who will strategize with you. So you want to select your team with others that are motivated towards that same end and might complement your skill sets so that they can think outside and stretch, and you can be thought partners in this process of refining and developing your program. You don't want to be in it on your own, although it's beautiful to say, I did this and I created that. Does not allow for the longevity that you need to be thinking about for the future of your program. And so almost having a design team sets you up in those first years of practicing your program to understand as a nonprofit leader or how to work with a board of directors. Because there's going to be different personality types, and there's going to be different skills and different and when there's volunteers, different capacities. So there's going to oftentimes be some type of burnout. So you got to be careful. You want to select your team and make sure that they can commit to the time in which you are developing this program. So you might not ask them to commit for 5 years. You might say, let's have 4 meetings in the next month together so we can discuss how we can create this vision into reality, how we can address this program, this opportunity that is upon us, or this challenge in our community. So you also want to schedule regular meetings, and get those meetings in your calendar early so people can see it, and you know the next time you're meeting, and in between you're preparing. Each of you are working on your part and bringing it to the table. And if you've created a program description, you want to make sure that you're able to have that feedback. A design team could be exactly what we need in the moment. And since this was like Jerry's kind of piece, I'm wondering if Jerry, you have anything else you might want to add about design team.
Um, yeah, I think it's important really to emphasize that temporary commitment, especially if you're reaching out to people that, maybe have skills and talents but haven't heard about your program. How many people want to be on a committee, especially with an open end and they don't know what's going to happen? Not very many people. But if you ask for, it could be 3 meetings or 5 meetings or 6 meetings, more people would be likely, to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they would kind of jump in. Another thing about design teams is you always want to get to know the people and see what they're good at. And, especially if they're volunteering, they're going to want to volunteer doing something that they're going to have fun with. So you wouldn't want to ask somebody to be on the phone if they don't like to be on the phone. You wouldn't want to ask somebody to design a brochure if they're not into that. So if you can find what people are good at and what they like, and I think of it as their wheelhouse, and then kind of fit them in there. And then another thing, we've brought together plenty of design teams, and what I've seen is that if you don't give somebody something to do, then they're not going to show up. Don't ask somebody to come sit in on meetings and not involve them, and not give them assignments. So those are just a few tips.
I agree. And so the diversity of your team is super important. And I think a huge part of being the visionary of your program, of seeing the call to action and then creating that program from the ground up, is about keeping, those that great energy around you too, because you will iron sharpens iron, so you will get energy from one another, and hopefully you will stretch each other to, because maybe you have different ideas, and it helps you to formulate what that program should really exist as. So thank you for this idea of design team. I think it's essential when we're starting grassroots efforts, and oftentimes it happens naturally. There might be multiple people that see this challenge or this opportunity in your community and want to be part of that solution, or have been in the past. So it's important to get out there and make sure you have the right people on your team at the onset.
And I think too, it's a really good way to get input from the community and make it, working with so many people, a lot of times it's just one person that has an idea, and it, something doesn't feel right about just one person having an idea and making it their mentoring program. I call it Bob's mentoring program or Alice's mentoring program. You don't want to just have one person with this vision. You want it to be a true community effort. You want it to be culturally relevant, and that's why you want to, if you can, get youth voice in about, especially goals and really activities. What do the young people, whether in a one-to-one program or a group mentoring program, what do they want to do? And sometimes it comes down to what kind of fun they want to have too, because they don't want to just get in a program that promises to teach them something. They want to have fun. But so I see a design team as really a way of getting the values and the culture of the community to funnel into your program.
Yeah, and I think Solomon Oh, Suleiman Mohammed. I hope I didn't butcher your name too much, but I wanted to give you a shout out because I think you brought up something we definitely wanted to cover, and that is, and we had in one of our earlier slides, which you will all have copies of, so you don't have to make, you don't have to do screenshots, but it's a good way to get stuff going right away. Um, we do have, we in aging up, one of the things we did was a focus group, right? So doing a gap analysis in your community or a focus group, all that research that you do ahead of time all contributes to making a really sound program. So yes, thanks for bringing that up. You can bring stakeholders together and to contribute to your program. And even from those stakeholders, maybe there's one or two that spark interest in this even further and want to contribute in a greater way. So yeah, I think that's the secret sauce, making sure that you are foundational when it comes to your own relationships, because those relationships will see your program through when we're building programs around relationship development. And I think that next slide is yours, Jay.
Okay. So I think Florence has been answering questions. Do we want to just take a look at the chat, or Jake, is anything coming up?
I think one question that someone had, I think that it was in reference to the statistics, Florence, that you were sharing about cost per match. Do you know if that data or if there is data available for like that for group mentoring programs?
Well, Jerry's the guru of group mentoring. So I wonder, but it's not studied as much, is it?
Yeah, I don't think the cost is studied quite as much, and it really depends on how you run your program, because you could have like a full-time staff member or two or three if it's a huge program, run the program. And also you could just get a part-time person. So my experience is, and I've seen people debate this, but my experience is that it costs less to run a group mentoring program. That designation of FTE that we have in the business, full-time equivalent, which would be like one full-time equivalent would be one person, say 40 hours a week. I think it just takes a part, especially for a small group mentoring program, just a part-time FTE per week. And again, it just depends on how much interaction you're going to have with the mentees and their parents. If you've already got a curriculum set up, or does the program coordinator have to create a curriculum kind of from scratch every week? The largest cost in any mentoring program is typically the staff. So you kind of start out with, what's it going to cost to bring that staff person in, and how much time is he or she going to spend on the program, and start from there. So I've seen group mentoring programs run with 20, like a 25% FTE, or uh, just a quarter of the hours that typically somebody would put in a week. I guess 16 hours a week.
But those investments are important. And although I have seen research about group mentoring programs, it does exist out there. I can't put my thumb on it, but I know there's great program models that do exist. So Boys and Girls Club, and also the Y maybe, and 4-H. Uh, there's so many wonderful programs, and I know that they research how effective their impacts are with those really well funded programs. So I would start there to figure out the cost per match when it comes to group mentoring. But as Jerry explained, it's going to be maybe a third of the cost, because you can't underestimate. You definitely want to overestimate the cost of your program so that you're not skimping on things when you're creating something for our young people. Any other questions out there? I like this QA part.
It looks like we have a quick question from someone. This is a great question. Just could one of you quickly share what does FTE stand for?
full-time employee, FTE. So at Big Brothers Big Sisters of the North Coast, we're the smallest agency in the state of California out of the 14 affiliates of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America here. And we only have 3.5 FTEs. I have seen research that mentoring programs should not have less than 3 employees, 3 FTEs, full-time equivalent or full-time employees that are part of your agency. So when you're thinking about that cost per match, that's where that comes back in. That does fund that match support, those recruitment hours that take up a bulk of your time, and all the development that you'll be doing along the way.
Thank you. And it looks like one other question, which maybe we could even include this in follow-up if we don't have it right now, but this person is wondering if either of you know of any sample scripts or templates for reaching out to businesses for in-kind donations.
I do have.
Do you have any, Florence?
Of course I do. I've developed many, so I have some. So we might have to make sure, Jake, that ends up in their packet. So I'm going to put that note down so we can share some scripts. A really great book that I read is called The Ask, and I'll have to get and I'll put in the inside of the chat a link to that book. But I think it's really important to start with your foundation. Like, really just go to your community foundation. There's so much information there. There's so many books you can borrow. I still borrow books from our community foundation. In fact, I have a couple samples here. I have writing winning proposals that I borrowed from. This book would have cost me $150 for my program, but instead I'm borrowing it for a week, and I'm extending that week because, we don't have time for that. But it's all about winning proposals now. It's not about just grant writing. I also have assessments for the chief executive. And I found an old school gem, board member orientation. So I still go, even though I have templates and tools, I'm still going to my community foundation for those resources. And to answer someone's question, would a point would 25%, would that not be a part-time employee? Sure, if we're going to get into the details of the vernacular, sure. But when you're thinking about FTEs, it wouldn't be, it would be, we often just say, how many FTEs you have. I actually have 5 employees, but only 3.5 FTEs. So some of those employees are part-time. So it gets muddled, but yeah, it's an easy way to talk about your entire team and the capacity that you have when you just say FTE.
Right. Awesome. I think some of the other questions that came up in the chat we'll probably get to as they're around processes and guidelines. So I think we can kick it over to Jerry.
Okay. Thank you, and thanks for that presentation, Florence. A lot of great information. I just wanted to mention a couple things that came to mind while you were presenting, Florence. One thing about starting small, and maybe you covered it, but I missed it. If you did cover it, several months in, if you start small, say even with 5 matches, several months in, you can reevaluate. So let's say that you really want to get services to a lot of young people, and you don't want to wait a long time. Well, even 3 months in, you can look and see how much staff time you've spent, how much money you've spent, and then just do the multipliers, whether it was easy or hard with the staffing that you had. And so if you were doing 5 matches and you wanted 50 matches, you might start, like multiplying your time almost by 10, maybe not by that much, because some of the stuff you wouldn't have to reinvent. Anyway, there's that one. And then another thing with the grant writing, around the years 2000, 2005, money was pouring in from all over, nationally, statewide, for mentoring programs. And then that changed a little bit after that. So a really good strategy for grant writers is to look at funding from different sources, from funding sources that want to do different things like pregnancy prevention, juvenile justice programs, foster youth programs, and then write a grant how mentoring could be a strategy to create positive outcomes in that area. And that's what most programs do now, because there's just not a lot of money coming from, federal or state just saying, here's money for a mentoring program. So you have to make a case for it. So we're going to get into program design now, and really the documents, to me, they define your program. If you don't have documentation, you might not have a really good structure for your program, and you need really good sound structures for your mentoring program. And the structure is also synonymous with your operating system. So we're going to talk about 3 documents for designing new programs or for strengthening programs that maybe haven't got into the paperwork so much to this point. And one you can see is the Early Visioning Mentoring Program. So that's by Dr. Dusty Ann North from our California Mentoring Partnership. I've used it a number of times. It's not a nationally known document, but it probably should be, because it really gets into helping people describe the basics of their program. And then really the foundation for youth mentoring is the elephants. It is the elephant. The elements of effective practice for mentoring. We'll talk a lot about that today. And then the generic mentoring policy and procedure manual. So next slide, please. So I mentioned Dr. Dusty Ann North's early mentoring program visioning worksheet. And here is a partial excerpt. When I've worked with new programs, I've always felt that if they could come together with the basics of the program, with the kind of the nuts and the bolts, and a kind of foundational description, that would really get the program going in a good direction. It gives you the ability to tell people what your program is about, what the outcomes are going to be, what kind of a mentoring model, how many young people you're going to serve, how many mentors you're going to need. So here's a partial excerpt on your screen, the goals and rationale for the program. The second one is really about the second and third about mentee outcomes. And then it starts to get into your mentoring model. So we have these in the handouts. It actually gets into the effective practices, which we're going to cover in a minute. It's like how you're going to recruit, screen, train, match, and so forth. But as you work with a worksheet, initially, you don't have to get into the details. But if you just answer the first part, which starts with these bullet points on your screen, you'll really begin to define your program. So next slide, please. So this is an example of a very brief program description. I've worked with Los Angeles Teen Mentoring. It's a really good program. And I just took this off of their website. And this is a very short description. So you can see, if later on you go back and look at the early mentoring program visioning worksheet, that the questions asked will help you begin to come up with the description. A lot of people will, or a lot of programs will answer this a little bit longer, describe their program a little bit longer. And somebody talked about, or had a question earlier about going to funders and asking for monies, and do you have a template? I really think it begins with the program description, what you're doing, and then you could just kind of tag on, what the ask is. So when you get this program description together, it can serve many purposes. Sometimes you can create a mission from it, along with maybe your logic model. But it's also a way to communicate with referral sources. You could see that if you were trying to get referrals from a school or something, you would send them something like this, maybe a little bit more detail, and tell them about your program. So it could be that, it could be for funders, it could be for parents. And if you make it a little bit more inviting, it could be also for mentees, letting the mentees, the potential mentees, know what the program is about. Okay, next slide, please. So this is really the foundation for youth mentoring. The effective practices actually begin in about 1990 or 1991. I believe it was in uh, Washington, D.C. A small group of people got together and said, what makes for a successful mentoring program? So essentially, they were looking for best practices. So they've had, this is the fourth edition now. They're getting ready to put out a fifth edition probably next fall. I talked to Mike Geringer from Mentor, who is instrumental. He's the guy when it comes to the elements of effective practice, and he thinks that they'll be out by fall. When I started training about 25 years ago, I started training programs and workshops in person about the effective practices. And to tell you the truth, I didn't really know how they all fit together, but sometimes you got to get out there and pitch something. You're put on the spot. You don't really get the sense of how they work. A few months into being in front of people and talking about the effective practices, the light bulb went on. And the first part of the light bulb was it's about program safety. It's about mentee safety. So each of these elements has a factor that will increase the safety for the mentees and reduce actually then the liability for the programs. And the other thing that came to me is that they're in chronological order. First things first, last things last. You recruit before you screen before you train before you match, and so on and so forth, down to closure. Um, if you leave any one of these tasks out or make it weak, then your program can basically implode at that weak link. So the example is you can do everything right in every area, but not really follow up in monitoring and support. And if you don't monitor, say in a one-to-one program, if you don't monitor your matches, then people could stop meeting, or they could meet in an unsafe way and create havoc and tragedy in your program. So you have to focus on each and every one of these. Some people go, well, I don't want to start a cookie cutter program. Well, it's not about a cookie cutter program because you can follow the effective practices and your program can be night and day as far as you can, compared to any other program. But these are basically, number one about the safe practices, especially when you get to like recruiting the right people, screening the right people, training them in the right way, matching the correct matches, providing monitoring and supporting in a way that matches will be safe. And even closure has a safety factor. So you can refer to each task as you design your program. The effective practices actually come in three different forms. I have two down here. The way to get acquainted with them is a 4-page checklist, and it doesn't overwhelm you. You can see how they kind of all work together. And then there's also the 92-page doc if you want to take in a deep dive. There's actually two levels of practices. The basic practices that you'll need they're identified even in the checklist. They're called baseline. And then if you want to strengthen your program, they are called, I forget, but I'll see it in a minute here. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. So they're enhancements. And then actually in the 92-page doc, there's a third category, which is really great for grant writing. The third category is called justifications. So they'll even, in the long document, the 92-page document, they will refer to a study which proves the point that you're trying to make. So if you're screening in a certain way and you're writing a grant, you can be looking at the 92-page document and it'll have a citation of why you screen in a certain way. You can drop that into your grant and people reading the grant will go, oh, these people have really done their work. So anyway, I wanted to give you a screenshot of two of the 4 pages of the 4-page checklist. And again, you can see how their chronological order, how they fit together, how they tell you the step-by-step process. So next slide, please. And then here's a close-up of the 4-page checklist on screening. So you can see that, has a lot to do with safety and how they fit together. And again, that it's a step-by-step process. So it talks about a face-to-face interview for screening. These are best practices. The research has shown when you do these things, your program is much more likely to be a safe and effective mentoring program. Again, look at the 4-page checklist, and then if you're writing grants or going through, the specifics of operations, you can look at the 92-page doc. Okay, next. And so this is it actually has the effective elements of effective practices in it. And I think it's about 20 years old. It was developed by the Northwest Educational Regional Lab, very long name, in Portland. I don't think they exist any longer, but Mike Geringer, who is kind of the brains of the effective practices for Mentor the National Mentoring Partnership, was the chief author of this manual. And I've used it many times in working with programs. And it covers all those tasks: recruitment, screening, training, matching. And you go through it, and you can get it in digital form. And I'll show you in a minute how you can start to replace the name of your program with a hypothetical program. And as you go through it, it covers every area, and you can develop your complete operating procedures for your program. And it contains, the beautiful part about it, many beautiful parts, is it contains about every form or letter possible in mentoring, including, mentor acceptance letters, mentor rejection letters. It has a whole section on recruitment, developing a recruitment plan. Again, you edit the manual to fit your program. If you walk through it, especially with somebody who knows mentoring, maybe who's a consultant who has run a mentoring program, then you've really got a solid working document. And let's see, I had another point. I'll think of it in a minute. Oh, I may get to this later, but I just wanted to cover it in case I forget that you can find it in several places online if you Google it. I think we have a link for the digital version because it comes in a PDF version, which is hard. You can copy a PDF, but when you paste it, it gets all wacky as far as the formatting. But if you find the digital version, it won't allow you to edit it, that particular version, but you can copy it, paste it in a Word document, and the formatting is almost perfect again. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of actually the PDF version, and you can see again, it's an excerpt from mentor screening in the generic policy and procedure manual for mentoring. And this is just one of the areas that you can go through and make it your own. And again, the generic policy and procedure manual helps you to develop your operations in a step-by-step, safe and effective way. Next slide, please. So I did this yesterday because I hadn't done it in a long time. I went to the generic policy and procedure manual. I found the digital form, which we will give you the link to. I copied it. I pasted it in a Word document. The hypothetical program in the generic policy and procedure manual is called New Insights. So I went to my Word program. I don't know if you've ever done, I think many of us have, the find and replace. So you put New Insights in the find kind of window, and then whatever your program's name is in the second window, and you click it. And when I did it, it made 160 changes. So I worked with a lot of programs, and they take 3 minutes to do that. And then you look at the manual, and it's got the name of your program all the way through it. And it's a really good first step, and it kind of gives you confidence that you can get this process going, and then eventually the entire manual will be yours. And as you go through it, you'll describe your program. It could be a group mentoring program, and so you'll take where they have the numbers of mentors to mentees, and you might say, they might say a one-to-one mentoring program, and you say a group mentoring program, and that we have 2 mentors for every 8 mentees or something like that. And that's how you make it your own. Okay, next, please. Um, Florence and I came up with this list of documents and training materials. Your program may look a little different. Perhaps you'll have fewer documents. Maybe more likely you'll have more documents, but these are an example of, if I were helping a program, I'd want them to have at least these things. So a logic model, and it could be a very, very simple a mission statement. And just a note on a mission statement, even though you may have a bigger organization like a nonprofit or be working out of a school or a church, I think it's really good to have a mission statement that is focused on your program. Because if your mission statement is focused on the nonprofit, it may be kind of a general mission statement about what the nonprofit is doing. But your mission statement needs to communicate to program participants and funders what the mentoring portion of your program is going to do. And then again, I mentioned this before, foundational. If you can come up with a brief program description, then you'll be on your way. You'll be able to begin to inform referral sources, funders, people that on your design team, and then the design team can actually help you amend the program description. But you can be able to start to communicate those things. And then I won't go through each and every one of these, but these are some of the materials that you'll need. Plus, hey, you need a filing system too for all this stuff, especially for the matches. So next slide, please. So we could have mentioned this earlier. Florence and I talked about it, but we wanted to mention it sort of later on in the training, towards the end, so that you would remember it. If you're just learning how to run a mentoring program or design a mentoring program or, to implement a mentoring program, it's best if you have either a number 1 or number 2 right here, be mentored by a knowledgeable mentor program person or staff, or receive coaching by an experienced mentoring consultant. Florence talked about building a house. You could learn how to build a house out of a book, but it would be better if the carpenter is like right next to you and you're hammering nails, and the carpenter says, you got to hold a nail like this, because, they've been through it before. So these first 2, I think, are the most important. And the third, I think, would be to join a community of practice, such as, a mentor affiliate. Out here, we also have the California Mentoring Partnership. There's also Mentor California within California. And probably, to me, the fourth best way would be to volunteer to mentor in a well-run mentoring program. And if you can get the program coordinator's ear or program staff's ear, ask them questions about why they do things in certain ways. And then you can see some of the other ways. They're all important, but I think the top 2 are, finding that live person that can really, assess maybe your strengths and even places where you need to become stronger, and have it. Mentoring is about relationships, so building your program is also about relationships too. Oh, Florence, I forgot to ask, when we're way past the time that I talked about the elements of effective practice, but do you have any tips on the elements of effective practices as you've used them?
Oh, yeah. First, the checkoff sheet. Don't get overwhelmed by the mini tips and the enhancements uh, there. Just start off with a checkoff sheet and start where it counts. I love that it's divided up in areas, and you want to really focus on those individual areas and give them individual attention. So divide your time up based on those quadrants, and then tackle enhancements later. Although you want to know what they are, maybe there's easy ways to do a lot of them, especially when it comes to, I think one that seems like it's an enhancement, but it really isn't, is mentor appreciation. Because although people say they volunteer out of just the kindness of their heart, and oftentimes they start that way, their expectations are huge, and they need to be acknowledged for the work and the time that they're investing into your program and into your thoughts. So lots of things, elements of effective practices. I mean, when they came out, we were so excited, because it is such a great roadmap. So it's something you can go back to always. And we have lots of webinars on the elements of effective practices in mentoring. So we used to call it EEP. So if you ever see EEP out there, that's the same thing. We've added it in for mentoring recently. So make sure that you're looking for those resources.
Thank you. Um, that's great. A question came up, and I just wanted to answer because it's really about safety and liability. Is it okay to use another organization's safety policy and handbook instead of formulating from scratch? I think you can do that. You can use another organization's policy, but a thing that, and I wanted to mention this, and I had forgotten, so I'm really glad that you brought this up. Each state has different statutes about child abuse reporting, and possibly even areas, but it's usually a state by state, as far as legislation, the laws. So California just came up with some different laws on mandated reporting. So as you go through a policy and procedure manual, or if you're developing your own, or if you're borrowing somebody else's, you'll have to find out what your state guidelines are. And also, too, if you're part of a 501c3, or if you have, if you're with a school or a church, well, let's go back to 501c3. You have a board, and your board is responsible, legally and financially responsible, for what your program is doing. So any policies and procedure, you need to pass it by your board people and get the blessings of your board too. Okay, and next slide. We were going to ask the question, and I don't think we have to put this in the chat, but I would like everybody to think about how you are learning to manage a youth mentoring program, including this webinar, but we're going to give you some resources later. But you might want to think about, is there a person or a learning community that I can contact to get more information? And then we have a couple more resources. What Mentor did in the last decade or so, they came up with supplements, what they call supplements to elements of effective practice. And again, Mike Geringer is the kind of the leading force behind this from Mentor. And so these are all the different areas, and they're not as thick as a 92-page version. They could be 6 or 8 or 10 pages on the specifics of these different types of mentoring. So for instance, if you're going to run a group mentoring program, you could look at the main body of effective practices, including starting out with the checklist, but then look up, the supplements to the elements of effective practice group mentoring, or it could be STEM or LGBTQ, any of these areas, and they get into specific practices based on research. And next slide. This is also a really good document because there's not as much out there on how to develop a group mentoring program. I would look at the supplements of elements of effective practices for group mentoring, and then I would look at this document too, which covers overall program design, mentor to mentee ratios, curriculum development, and then how to conduct a sharing exercise and kind of a process group. And I think that's it. So next slide. And Florence, do you want to take this away?
Yeah, so this is our practice for all of you that are going to continue to join the community of practice, we'd like you to type in the chat the one thing today that you learned and that and please do put it, do a big thing that you learned today, maybe even something, and then jot down for yourself, how will you implement what you learned today? Because when we put things from thought into pen and then action, they happen. So we want you today. Put it in the chat. Let's shout it out. I also want to just say Happy National Mentoring Month. What a wonderful time for us to come together and think about grassroots efforts to reduce the gap, the mentoring gap in our community as it seems to be widening, even with all of our many efforts. So your thought about your community and all the work that you're going to do to develop your mentoring program so it's sound, safe, and it's sustainable, those elements are so essential for our nation, our international community. The program that has come to you, your vision, or has been tasked to you is essential for some youth. So thank you for the time you're going to put in. What are some things that are there any themes, Jake? Are you able to follow along and see what we're learning today? Something that we're seeing, a big thing we're all taking away?
Yeah, it seems like the language and the idea around starting small is really resonating with a lot of people. Thanks. There's so many people putting things in the chat, but that one seems to be the most common. Also, a lot of appreciation for uh, learning about these other resources like the EEPM and things like that for the first time. Some love for group mentoring, which I'm sure Jerry, you're especially happy to see. So yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff in the chat so far.
Yeah, I see a lot about that. The tool, the policies and procedures manual, the generic tool. I mean, I think I learned so much myself when I just went through that and had to ask those questions and answer those questions about the programs that I've developed. So please look into that. That's excellent. I'm so glad that so many people are seeing that for the first time and will have these tools as you develop your programs. So do date that first step too. Make sure that that you're writing down what you learned, but also the first step you're going to take, and then put a date on it, right? Because that's when we know will come to fruition. So we want to set those good. This is time where a lot of us think and we become intentional about our goals. So we want to start that practice today.
So there's a couple of questions that are already in the questions section. Linda, I believe, actually wanted your contact information, Florence. So I don't know if you want to type it into the chat. And when you say community foundation, who is that exactly? Community foundations are usually from big metro areas. Sometimes they serve outlying areas too, but like in San Diego, it's the San Diego Foundation, and they're a clearinghouse. And what happens is it could be 200 foundations. They don't want to deal with giving their money away. So they go to one foundation, they give them the criteria, and then the one foundation, like San Diego Foundation, kind of broadcasts that to anybody who wants that. So usually you can go into the foundation, ask questions, and they can lead you to applications for different funders. Somebody asked about the resources, if they honor intersectionality and cultural humility. That's a great question. I always think that the people on your design team or who are helping you need to facilitate that. We're also, involved. Florence is involved in giving Jedi trainings. I don't know if you wanted to talk about the Jedi aspect of developing a program quickly, Florence.
Well, you want to think about your intentions the whole time you're developing those foundations, right? So, developing your program with the end in mind, how you're really going to impact the community. We learned so much from Dr. Tori Beeston Certain, who has really impacted our field around critical mentoring. So, if you have that asset, if you have that resource, that book, make sure you dust it off and you bring that back to the forefront. And I know that Mentor created a whole website led with her discoveries and centered on youth voice. And so that was the one thing that I thought was super important that we wanted to also mention is how important it is to get from your participants or the community, understand what the community's needs are. And even though we can be very well intentioned, developing programs for us by us is really a sound way to acknowledge an existing harm that has been in the community. So much to learn there. And I know, Jake, you probably have other resources when it comes to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which we like to say Jedi, just because it's kind of cool to think of yourself as that person putting on with that saber, right? That lightsaber that you're going in to attack these issues firsthand, that you're putting that first that mind as well, that you're being intentional about the impacts that you're making. And even in your one of the things that I loathe in the mentoring community is saying that fixes all problems, right? Mentoring relationships have to be part of every solution, which makes our work foundational. But having a mentor doesn't fix every situation. So poverty is still going to exist until we decide as a community that it doesn't. There's all of these other environmental issues that will still arise, and systemic pressure and systemic issues have existed for a very long time. So although our programs can spark a light in a community and be that change maker, they can't that we should not say that they're going to be a fix all.
Thank you for that. And then Erica in the question says, is there any type of certification involved with becoming a mentor? The only certification I've found is I think Dr. Gene Rhodes has some kind of certification for mentors, and it's very involved and it involves classroom work. So her last name is spelled Rhodes. She's one of the great researchers of mentoring. I know in California and other places too, people and organizations and states have backed away from certifying mentors because then they believe that they would then become responsible if the mentor, did any ill act or was there was a problematic match. It would come back to the people or the organization that would certify. So we usually don't certify mentors, but I did hear that Dr. Gene Rhodes has some kind of classroom work that does. And then maybe we should kind of hit the last slides because we're coming up on the bottom of the hour and we
Wow, the
need
time
to
went so
go
fast.
to resources. Did you have something,
Yeah, I just
Florence?
wanted to say Chronicles of Evidence-Based Mentoring. You if you Google Gene Rhodes, that will come up, and it's another great resource for especially those of us that love the research.
I'm putting that in the chat.
Awesome. Well,
Hey, and
yes.
then so
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention this resource. There's a one-stop link for all the elements of effective practices, including the supplements. And then Florence talked about Jedi work. There's actually a supplement on critical mentoring, which addresses a lot of the equity and diversity questions. And then there's some of the tools that we talked about today are in the resource slide. And next, please.
Perfect.
And I think this one's for Jake.
Yes. Yeah. And so just for folks who are asking questions about resources, templates, I've been taking notes of everything that people have been requesting, and I'll be sure to upload that to the website with everything else. So even if we didn't get to your question about a specific template, after this, we'll make sure to collect and gather all of those things for you. I love that people are so wanting of all these resources because they're out there, and I forgot who said it, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So this is a great just initial kind of spot to go for other resources. This is on our mentoring website, just mentoring.org. You just click this first tab. That arrow should be pointing to what we do. and then the resource library, and then type in anything that you want to search. And this is really the main area where you'll find most of the things that we're talking about today. And again, I'll share the rest on that specific web page where the webinar will be.
And I would like to put this little note out there. If you, for some reason, get to a dead end or a dead page, don't worry. It's only because there's so much resources and we're always redeveloping these links. So it's still there. Do exactly what Jake says because it'll help you not get discouraged. The information is at your fingertips.
Yeah, thank you for that. Always updating the website, and so there's so much out there, and just also feel free to reach out to especially this email that I'm sharing, but any mentoring email that you have in case you're looking for a specific resource. But as always, you can email us with any feedback or questions at collaborativewebinarseries@mentoring.org. Mentor affiliates, incredible resources all across the country that can help you with training, resources, public awareness and advocacy. They can help you get started with a lot of these things that we talked about today, and you can click this link or again, go to the website to find your local affiliate. The Mentoring Connector is a really great resource just for mentor recruitment. So you can get your program posted there and folks across the country can narrow down their areas or the type of mentoring that they want to do and find your mentoring program. Last but not least, we have the National Mentoring Resource Center, where you can access even more evidence-based resources and also apply for some of the training and technical assistance at no cost that we were talking about. Remember, there's going to be a 3 to 4 minute long anonymous survey that pops up on your screen after the webinar. So please feel free and please do fill that out so that we can hear from you, learn what we can do better, learn what we should be exploring in future webinars. As I said before, this is just part 1. So we have 2 whole other webinars to go into other details and have other conversations as well. About next week, a week from now, you'll have an email where it'll direct you how to find the slides, recording, and resources. We could skip that last bit. I've been sharing the thing in the chat, the link in the chat around the community of practice. So if you want to join that, feel free to click that. Again, that'll be uploaded to the website as well. And then you can join us next month. Our next series will be on wellness and resilience in mentoring. And so that'll be happening on February 22nd, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And again, that'll be another 3-part mini series. So thank you all so much for joining us today. So glad that you were here. Huge thank you to Florence and Jerry for this incredible presentation and gathering all these resources, sharing them with us. And again, feel free to everybody in the audience today to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're all in this together. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, happy National Mentoring Month. This is a great month for us and a great month to start these conversations. So take care, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.